Beautiful Desolation is a post-apocalyptic isometric adventure game set in Africa, specifically South Africa, with some strong sci-fi elements to it. But beyond that simple explanation, there's a lot going on in this game. Like, it's super easy to get lost in trying to talk about everything going on in its story, which on the surface is about two brothers, Mark and Don, along with a robot dog named Pooch, who are trying to get home. Though things are really complicated because there's some form of time travel involved. Also, they'll be dealing with post-apocalyptic civilizations with heavy tribal punk vibes, and talking techno-organic trains, sentient plants, a mountain-dwelling nanoswarm that's had its mind split in two. And that's not even the really strange stuff like the undead servitor people living in the trees, and the flay. Oh god, the flay. But we'll get into all of that in a bit. It's one of those games that is pretty easy to describe as odd, but a very interesting kind of odd where you're not sure what's going on for a lot of it, but the more you explore its world, it slowly starts to make sense. And the beginning of the story doesn't really hold your hand either, it just throws you in and expects you to want to figure out stuff for yourself. Like if you've ever wanted a game where you go into a world that feels pretty alien and makes you wonder what happened in its past to make it the way it is, then this is the game for you. There are going to be parts that might go over your head. Well, for me some of it did. Like I think I know what's mostly going on, but I'm very open to correction. Though some of the South African stuff in the game makes a bit more sense to me since it's where I'm from. Like it combines a lot of South African culture in interesting and unusual ways, from the names of places to the different people you find. And there are a fair bit of references that I think only South Africans might get, which I found pretty fun.
You think they have castle here?
Though there are a ton of other influences from different games and movies. Like this door eye thing is straight out of Return of the Jedi.
Hello?
And even Shia LaBeouf is hanging around in this game. The game's developers, the Brotherhood, who are South African, are known for paying homage to other media that have had an influence on them. And after making their more well-known games, Stasis and Kane, wanted to try something different and set a game from a South African perspective, with all the different cultures we have going on here, and see how that could influence a dystopian story. Which sounds like a pretty unique setting to me. I mean, most post-apocalyptic games are either set in America, or if you want to be spicy, Europe? Like, there's still a lot of untapped potential for post-apocalypse settings around the world. Well, maybe except Australia. I mean, that would just be a simulation game, right? But to my knowledge there aren't too many set in Africa, which could give a new perspective to the genre. The game does however take heavy inspiration from games like Fallout, which for me this game gives off a lot of the same vibes. Like the visuals of this game is what I imagine Fallout games would look like now if they had stayed on the isometric path instead of going down the Bethesda one. Even the dialogue screens are pretty close to those in the first two Fallout games. Though this game does have landscapes that have way more variety, and there's so much detail in them that it makes the world feel lived in and that there's a lot of history behind all of it, which makes you want to explore it. From beaches that have hollowed out shipwrecks and some odd creatures hanging around.
What was that?
To mountains that have parts of crashed space stations all over it. And old military bases that have some really wild electric stuff happening. And some places that just feel alien. Like they've still got all the usual greatest hits of post-apocalypse visuals, with bits of old broken infrastructure that's been overgrown and ruined by time, that gets contrasted with outposts and bits of civilization that have been strung together from the past, though it's mixed with people and tech you might not expect, like neon-style holograms showing information and advertising a good time.
I can smell the beer from here.
Or flying transports that use a network of gates that can warp you to other regions in an instant, all built way after the apocalypse, which kinda makes this setting more of a post-apocalypse one. Like the big disaster happened, but people got over it eventually, then some wars happened, and even a bunch of cultures have come and gone since all of that. Also the character designs are really unique and do a great job of showing off what each of the different individuals and cultures you come across are about. Like those who believe in the ascendancy see their bodies as just vessels of flesh that you need to give up if you want to ascend to greater things. Or the Nasi, who are very much into showing their prowess and history as warriors and use animal masks to display that power. Even the main character design does this. Like, what would make the most sense for someone looking like they're from a different time and place, even to us in the modern day? Well, give them hair straight out of the 80s and maybe hint at people's nostalgia for that time by literally giving them rose-tinted glasses. The character designs aren't the only thing from the 80s the game's got. The music, which is made by Mick Gordon, yes, that Mick Gordon, has some great synth music that would fit perfectly in a Blade Runner movie. There are also tracks you would probably expect in an African post-apocalypse game, like some slow, bassy drum beats for the more chilled areas. with more eerie tracks used to set the mood in slightly creepy places. And some of the music even gave me some of that darker mystery synth vibe that reminded me of Mass Effect 2 when exploring some areas. It's all really good stuff, with ambient audio doing a great job of making the different places feel alive and sometimes dangerous, while strongly hinting at what happened in the past. The voice acting, however, is swinging all over the place in this game. There are some really good ones, like the voice actress for Pooch is doing a great job, and there are some other fun performances, but there are others that feel like this is their first time voice acting, and it's mostly coming from the South African cast.
I heard you worked here. I'll be meaning to stop by. I just, haven't.
Yeah, I've been here a while. About 2 years, give or take. Nice place to keep out of the cold.
Like, I get they were going for more authentic South African voices instead of the usual, American or British ones we get in most English media, though it's not really working in this game. And it's not because South Africans can't act or perform, like clearly they can, even though Hollywood on occasion has pushed them to lose or reduce the accent. I don't think it's the accent that's making the voice acting not hit the mark, as I've heard pretty decent South African voice acting in a game before.
We can defeat these forces.
We can't afford to be wrong here, Saruk. Our people must continue.
Continue what? Running? Until we find somewhere else to die?
I see war has given you a voice.
The accent isn't the problem. I think the problem might be they've gotten South Africans who might not have much voice acting experience. Like from this one interview I read online, it sounds like they got some of their talent from message boards and Twitter. And I'm not saying you can't find talent that way. You can, but the results here aren't great. Also, maybe it was harder to find locals with experience in voice acting, so that might have contributed. Though that is me speculating. But I do appreciate them trying to make the voice work in the game more authentic to South Africa. It might not be the best it could be, but including it does give it a more South African vibe, and can let them include some local languages. It was fun to hear some Afrikaans, though it's mainly slang and swear words. Like kak. That's a fun one to say. Yeah, say it with me. EA is kak. It was also good to hear some NPCs speak Zulu and Xhosa, with some cool voice synth effects. I would have liked more of that in the game. It helps to make exploring the game's world more interesting when trying to figure out just what happened, which the game never reveals what exactly did take place to make the way the world is, but it does set up how things could be the way they are. Because at the start of the game, on a stormy night in the 1970s, while Mark and his fiancée are driving to go help his brother Don, a powerful shockwave causes them to crash and reveals a giant object has appeared out at sea, just floating off the coast of Cape Town. Is it alien or something from a different dimension or time? Who knows? But it gets named the Penrose because it looks exactly like a Penrose triangle, an object that shouldn't be able to exist in three-dimensional Euclidean space. So what's on it and what does it do? Well,
an object of untold technological abundance that advanced civilization on all frontiers. Hunger and disease eradicated, energy mastered, and mortality conquered.
But remember, this is just off the coast of 1970s apartheid South Africa, so...
But there are those who would oppose the might of Penrose Allied. Dissenters who fear our progress and our power, who would see our world cast back down into turmoil and chaos. There is no place in the world for these heretics, and they will be crushed beneath the heel of the agnate boot as we march towards our great future.
As you can tell, giving the South African apartheid government the cheat codes to super advanced tech is maybe not the best for world affairs. But anyway, 10 years go by with all this advanced tech, and the story picks up again with Mark going to see his brother Don for a favour. Now what threw me off a little about this game was because it looked a lot like an isometric RPG, I for some reason thought it was going to be more like a traditional RPG. Which in hindsight was mostly my fault. Like, looking at the history of what type of games Brotherhood makes, and the store page clearly saying what it is, I'm not sure why I had that perception. Maybe the Fallout vibes were too strong or something. Like, it does have story choices and an open world you can explore and stuff you can pick up, but you won't be messing with stats, skills or level ups. And there is combat, but it's very segmented off in an arena you can find late in the game. So much in fact that you don't need to do it if you don't want to. And the combat itself to me wasn't that fun or engaging. Like, maybe I was missing a mechanic or something, but it felt very bare bones to me. It's mostly you managing your points per turn to use your most effective damage skills and slowly wearing down the enemies in multiple rounds, and getting lucky with hit chances. You'll get combatants by receiving tokens from different factions that you'll help during the game, and there is a nice variety of them with interesting skills, but it does feel all a bit basic. Also, you'll have to make Don do the fighting, which brings back bad memories for him, and I didn't like doing that. The game is much more focused on its story and getting you to explore the world and find interesting characters and locations that you can have an effect on by how you choose to interact with them, with some item puzzles and quests here and there. That helps to push the main story forward. Speaking of which, looks like Don works as a pilot for a tour company that goes near the Penrose, which is perfect for the favor Mark needs.
You look, healthy.
Got a bit fit, yeah. But as long as I still fit in the chopper, it's all good. It's been, what, 9, 10 years? Last time I saw you was...
The funeral.
Yeah, it seems the last time these brothers chatted was nearly 10 years back, at the funeral for Mark's fiancée who died in that car crash, which also left Mark needing to use a brace to walk, but back to the favor.
I need your help, Don.
You in some sort of trouble?
No, nothing like that. I have to get up to the Penrose.
You're kidding, right?
Mark wants Don to fly him to the Penrose because he's trying to figure out what exactly the Penrose is and wants to go to the center of it, where there's this object that looks man-made. There's a strong hint that the impact the Penrose had on his life is the real reason he wants to know more. Though with it being very well protected, Don is hesitant to take him.
I run tours, little brother. We get too close and we get shot down.
But Mark insists, so Don says the best chance is to get on during a storm, as there won't be anyone on the Penrose and the weather will keep the air patrols grounded.
Going dark. Tourists love that cut.
The game's cutscenes are pretty cool and usually play at significant parts of the story or when you make a bit of progress discovering a new area. I like the visuals in them showing off the world and tech, however the character models do dip into the uncanny valley for me, but I still do enjoy them when they're sharp. They gave me a bit of that dopamine reward like older games did when you made progress in the story. Back on the Penrose though, Mark finds the object he was looking for, which looks like a probe of some kind. This is where I should mention the game's codec, which is Mark's journal. It's mostly drawings he makes about what he sees in the world, with the occasional hint or clues in it that you'll need to use to solve certain puzzles, like this password to get access to the site's backup data. We get the data, but an Agnate robot catches us in the act.
Halt! Do not move. Get onto the ground with your hands behind your head.
Though before we get caught, something happens. Okay, that looked painful, but we are still in one piece on the Penrose, though things do look a little different. And it's not exactly clear what happened, though there is this weird card thing in Mark's inventory now. Messing around with a nearby terminal seems to only make things worse.
Unclean beings. The holy shrine of Darius has been desecrated.
Holy. Where are we?
The human filth dares to address us while defiling the sanctorium of Darius.
Accessing additional justice protocols.
Okay, these Agnate soldiers, they see the probe at the center of the Penrose as holy and are calling it Doris. And they want to turn Mark and Co into thin pink mist just for getting close to it. But they do decide to show mercy because Mark's DNA shows no signs of mutation, which these people called the Ascendancy will want to see for reasons.
It is a lucky flesh sack to have cheated death so narrowly.
So along with Don and the Robodog, we get taken prisoner, but on the way the transport gets shot down. Somehow surviving the crash, Mark finds a radio which he hears Don's voice on, and it sounds like he's in a bad way. But Don manages to tell him he's near a buried satellite before blacking out. Looking around a bit, Mark comes across the thing that shot the transport down.
You survived and unscathed. You are still strong, my child, still strong.
Survived. It was you caused that crash?
It was the explosion that caused the crash, and I caused the explosion. So I suppose I did cause the crash. This time.
What? Okay, stuff's gotten a lot weirder. This thing called Old Dolly talks a lot like this has all happened before and that it's been waiting here centuries or something. He also tells Mark about a broken buffalo transport he can use to get to his brother and the parts needed to get it running. From talking to it, it's very much implied that Mark and the gang got teleported in the future by the Penrose, or maybe there's some kind of time manipulation going on. But why is this thing helping with exactly what's needed in this situation? Well, it shuts off before answering any more questions. So we go looking for parts and see the world's pretty much run down and has some odd creatures hanging around. Further up the beach is where we come across the robo-dog from the Penrose.
What the hell did you do?
Are you blaming me for this?
This was certainly none of my doing.
Mark manages to convince it that it's best if we all work together to figure out what's going on.
Alright, I will join you. But I will not be treated as a pet nor as a tool. I will accompany you until I can make contact with Control. And when we get back, you will be placed under arrest for trespassing on an active military base.
They are a little grumpy, but I mean we did break into a super top secret military area and maybe accidentally travel hundreds of years into the future, so their action is kind of fair. Going back to the crash ship, the Robodog manages to get a signal.
I've got a frequency. It's not Control, but it is something. This troop transport has its own sentience. It is dying. I do not know what to do for it, what to say to it.
I don't know how to help either. I don't know what would help a dying Agnate.
It's broken. Split in two. It is slowly fading away. Hello. I'm here. You're not alone. Not alone.
I don't think we can help save it. But we'll stay here with it.
It's gone. It's just gone.
I'm sorry. At least it heard some kind words in its final moments. I know this is hard, but I need access to its diagnostics.
I suppose it is what must be done. By the way, I'm Prototype 00 Combat Helper. You can call me Pooch.
Yeah, this game is gonna maybe mess with your emotions a bit. Okay, we get the part we needed from the crash ship and put in the buffalo transport, but we still need one more part, which Old Dolly has.
You will cast a stone into the water and create ripples. The ripples will open a maelstrom into which time itself will spill. The portal that can pull the Penrose from being held in this place and time.
Something is holding the Penrose here. What do you mean?
Yes, it is bound up, tied down, angry, clawing at the confines of its cage. Even if the portal between then and now was open this minute, the Penrose would still be bound to this place. The Ascendancy, the Tribulationists, they have it trapped. They worship it, yet they fear that it will leave them. To open the portal, you will need to repair the array that pulled the Penrose into your web, and release the spinning crimson anchors at Babel that hold the Penrose trapped to our where.
That's vague, but at least it gives us some sort of answer on what to do. Basically, we need to get that array working, and somehow get back to the Penrose, which could set things to their proper place and time, maybe. Though the array is going to need some important items to get working. We get some directions on one of the items, but the rest we're going to have to find ourselves.
Now go, my child, go.
Overriding safety protocols. Ejecting neural net.
Wow. Ever see someone want to avoid explaining things so hard they eject their spine at you? At least we can use it to get the buffalo transport working, so we can find Don and that array thing and get back to the past. This is when the game opens up and you can fly around and find and explore different locations and start mingling with the locals, who will give you quests to help you on your journey to find those array parts. Some are really strange when you first meet them.
I don't wanna talk to you.
I need your help.
The room is spinning. Mama, is it you? Mama, you ask Too many questions.
But I haven't said a thing.
Fuck. It's inside me. I can feel it. It's behind my eyes. Do you want to party?
My name is Agent.
Yeah, I know that guy might not make any sense and sounds like he's had too much to drink or something, but what's actually going on with him is pretty horrifying, though we'll get into that later. Which is kind of saying something because the least scary person you can talk to in this place is the bartender with no skin.
You have the look of a man seeking truth. Have a seat and tell Bra Bones what ails you.
Oh, and upstairs there's Mina.
Ah, a fresh face with virgin eyes falls upon me. You have strong arms, a strong back, and all your teeth. Yes, you will make a fine addition.
She's mostly harmless and does sell useful items that you'll need gold in exchange for credits to buy, which you'll find while going around different areas. I generally like discovering new locations and finding things in this game, and you'll find plenty of gold while you explore too, which you'll use to buy items you need to make progress in the story. But one complaint I have is you'll have to look in every nook and cranny to find stuff, as items will only appear if you get fairly close to them. And the problem is at its worst when you're not just looking for gold, but important quest specific items that you'll need to move the story forward, and in my experience you can quite easily miss them sometimes, as you might not have gotten close enough to trigger the option to pick them up, or might not have realized you could get to certain places on the screen. Like, the only times I got stuck in this game is when I didn't find a quest specific item that I had to check or walk through for, and found that it was in an area I'd already been in. This could be fixed a bit by making it so Mark doesn't need to get so close to trigger the take option, or maybe some hints from NPCs on where to look might help. Like, say if you had a robodog to point your attention to something they found in an area. Anyway, while doing all that exploring we found Don, though he's not in great shape after the crash.
This man is badly injured. Broken leg, at least 3 cracked ribs, compressed spine. But he is breathing.
Luckily we bought a first aid kit from Mina. That should heal him up.
How do you feel? You know, I'm not quite sure what half of those drugs actually do.
I feel great, actually. Even the old gut feels like it's cleared up.
This is around about the time in the game when you gain access to the wardens, which lets you warp to different regions. And you'll start to find out more about your companions and the world you've been thrown into. Like all 3 of the main characters, Mark, Don and Pooch have some trauma or emotionally hurt in some way. Mark losing his fiancée to a car crash and getting fixated on the Penrose, Don dealing with PTSD after the South African border war and an abusive father, and Pooch, who at the start you might think is just a robot dog doing its job of guarding things, but is actually one of the first agnates to be given emotions and sentience, which instead of the scientists handling with care and restraint, decided to do some experimenting, like wiping their memories multiple times along with some emotional manipulation, just to see what would happen.
They put me on display, opened me up for everyone to see. I felt afraid. They didn't care. They just wanted their accolades. And then they planned to take me apart all over again, try more experiments. I did not want that to happen.
You can probably imagine the kind of trust issues they have. Now, the choices you make in how you interact with them and either help them or don't will affect how things turn out later in the story. Which I like being given the choice, but the game does fall into making the choices feel a bit too binary. A lot of the interactions are either be a good decent person or be an absolute arsehole. It's fine I guess, but I have a feeling most people playing this aren't gonna be mean to the abused robot dog or the war veteran dealing with depression. Like, the only time I ever worried I was maybe being too nice was when Pooch just randomly started wildly laughing when I was walking around a few times. That was a little alarming, but we all have our quirks I guess, and they still are a robodoggo just having fun. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that the conversation choices for your companions on the journey aren't going to take you into any morally grey areas or be that hard really. Like, the only reason I can think of anyone would pick the arsehole option is just to see what would happen and then just immediately regret it and reload a save. Well, maybe you're more hardcore than me.
I'm hardcore now!
The game does however have more interesting choices when chatting with different characters and societies you come across that are going to be influenced by your actions and how you treat them. Though some of the characters are just fun to talk to, like Shongololo, the techno-organic train that reminds me of a slightly deaf grandpa just wanting to share stories.
Am I actually speaking to a train?
Ah!
Speak up! Did you say rain?
Train. Are you a train?
I sure hope it doesn't rain.
Or someone who knows more than they let on, like Caesar the Healer, who's bound to help others because he's a follower of Dullahan. He seems to know what might be going on, but is a bit cryptic about it.
Some of us even have knowledge of a future that we have already lived. But knowing the future can be a bad thing. Caesar has seen this all happen, but the Dullahan is wise, and we must all trust its path.
But the most impactful stuff will be having to pick a side and attempting to make a tough choice between two or more factions, so you can get those array parts you need to get back home. The outcome of some of these choices might not go the way you want either, which does spice things up. Like, as you get to know the Anasi, you find out about their warrior past, but they don't do much of that anymore, and are very focused on getting more herb, so they can chat to their ancestors. And this herb is provided by the Chizinyama, another tribe who are very reclusive and use pretty advanced tech. Like, they've scavenged some old boss tech and used it to build a force field around their homeland just for extra security.
We have trusted many people in our past, and that trust has often ended in blood staining the grass we now call home. It is hard for us to open ourselves to strangers, even those with the kindness of the old gods emanating from them.
They seem pretty chilled and just want to be left alone, and have actually pretty much stopped giving the Anasi any more herb recently. But as you find out more about them, you'll see that while on the surface they don't seem harmful, they are actually exploiting the Anasi, as any that come to them looking for more herb are used as slave labor.
Are the Hanasi here your slaves?
Slave is a terrible word, and there's no place among followers of the old gods. The Hanasi here are indentured to us. They give us the sweat of their brows constructing our ark, and we provide them with the herb they need.
The reason they justify this is they want to build an ark to get to their old gods, who speak to them in their dreams of a place they call Lial.
Who are your old gods?
The old gods are ancient forms of metal and lightning. They are looking for us, looking to be joined again to their creations. This world is harsh and hard.
They did attempt this generations ago with their first ark, but it ended in failure, and when they returned, their homeland was pillaged and destroyed, which is the reason for their distrust of outsiders and why they have the shield. They feel safer using others than working with them in most cases, and this gets shown even more with the Caicus, who take exploring to the extreme. They used to be nomads known for their great maps, but all that wandering around exposed them to ether, which is what I assume they call all the leftover fallout of chemicals and nuclear weapons that caused the end of the world long ago, so not great for their health. They eventually retreated to the trees to get away from all of that, where they found a transmitter which they thought was a link to the Dullahan, their gods. And the signals they got from the transmitter encouraged them to explore even more than they had before, which meant going deeper into the ether that eventually made their bodies so weak they started to lose the ability to see, touch, talk, and even walk. So to solve this problem, they started turning their near-dead people into drones with tech they got from the Flay, and that helped them to continue exploring. Though now they rely on the drones to do everything for them since their bodies are so frail. And that's how you get a culture of undead explorer servitors living in the trees. Oh, and if you want to know what it's like to be one of these servitors, chat to Nachi in the Nasi fort.
So, you're not allowed to die a natural death?
No. Narchi's tried before. It's forbidden.
Well, that's deeply depressing. Okay, now knowing all of that about the Caicus, guess who put them up to exploring more into the ether?
Before we went into hiding behind our shield, we placed transmitters around the world to ensure we could still commune with the old gods. Our holy shrine of communication is at the center of our village. The Caicus discovered one of our transmitters in the forests of Saxonwold.
The voice of Dullahan was one of your transmitters?
We were caught off guard when they began to call it the voice of the Dullahan. The old gods would have disapproved of this idolatry. The Dullahan is a false god. The Caicus were searching for meaning, for purpose in their lives. We gave it to them. They wanted to explore the world again, to search for new places and make new discoveries. Through the Caicus, the old gods had provided us with a way to search for Leal while we remained protected.
Yeah, the Chizinyama exploited the Caicus to try and help them find Lial, and they pushed them so hard that they turned into what they are now. They know what they did was wrong, but try to justify it by saying they just wanted to find their gods and rebuild their tribe. Though to me it seems they just use people without considering the consequences of what they're doing, which is pretty horrible. Okay, so during the story you'll get a choice of either helping the Chizinyama or Nasi get some information and data that can help them have an advantage when negotiating with each other. Like after all the stuff you've seen the Chizinyama do, you're probably going to side with the Hanasi, right? And the game does show either side of the choice by having either Pooch or Don talk to you about it before deciding. And there are little hints at what might happen if you side with the Hanasi. Like they do display dead bodies in their settlement, but it's bodies of fallen Hanasi that are being shown respect in their culture. So it's more like a really hardcore all year round Day of the Dead kind of thing. No problem, right? They're just displaying their warrior lifestyle. And it's not like they would do anything too drastic if they found out the Chizinyama were using their people as slaves, while also being denied the herb that allows them to chat with their ancestors. All this makes the choice kind of hard because you don't want the Nasi to continue being exploited, but you also might not want one side to do anything too violent. This meant I had to think a bit about the choice between the Chizinyama and the Nasi, which is usually a good sign if a game is getting you to think about the choices you make. Another thing I found interesting about the game was how things are linked together in creative ways that make some of the weird stuff make sense, and really adds to the world building, which I'll get into more details about in the spoiler section in a bit. But before we go into spoilers, I'll give you a bit of an idea of what it's like, so let's talk quickly about the Flame. In the later sections of the game, you'll come across their settlement near a volcano.
Fuck, it's hotter than a chili fort here.
We've actually met one of the Flay already, as you might remember, that really odd drunk guy from earlier. His name is Artem, and he's quite well regarded by other Flay.
Oh, Artem was the bravest Flay in all the Snake. They left seeking a cure for the foul brood.
They?
Yes, the Flay are symbiotes. Each Flay is two, the host and the bristled worm. They are separate, and yet they are one.
As nice as this guy makes it sound, and with a face like that, how could you not trust him? The truth is the worm actually controls their human hosts against their will. And the way they get their hosts is horrific, as they kidnap young children, because they need the child's body so they can expand more easily into their growing skulls. What's even more scary is they have more advanced tech than anyone you've come across, like they have lasers and power armor. And the only reason they haven't expanded outwards is because something called the Foul Brood is keeping them contained in their settlement.
If we step a foot off our bristad out of our homeland, we experience the onset of an horrific pain, like our brains are boiling inside our heads.
Which brings us back to Artem, who was searching for a way to remove the Foul Brood. His worm pushed his host body too far while searching, and the worm is now losing control, and is only barely keeping things together by giving his human host alcohol to sedate him.
Do you want a party?
So it kinda makes sense he was saying all that random stuff when you first met him.
Mama, is it you? Mama, it's inside me. I can feel it. It's behind my eyes.
There's lots more stuff like that if you dig into the story and start making the connections, which makes the game's world interesting to explore and unravel. And I haven't even talked about the nanomachines living on the mountains, or the talking plants, or the boss. Though that's going into spoilers, so if you want to check that out for yourself, then skip to here. Okay, so the mountain-dwelling nanomachines.
What are you?
We are Nest. You are not Nest. May we scan you to determine your origins? This scan will not be invasive. We assure you that we will not harm you.
Sure. These nanobots are a terraforming experiment from a space station that crashed a long while ago, who can only survive in cold climates. Now the problem is they are slowly running out of power to keep themselves chilled enough to survive. But some of the nanobots who crashed in the southern mountains came up with the idea that, hey, since they are terraforming nanomachines, why don't they use their tech to create a device to change the climate to suit them, and let them spread out. The nanobots in the north who managed to make the terraforming device ran some simulations on what would happen if they tried that, which the results were it would cause an environmental catastrophe. So the north nanobots said no to using it, but the south nanobots still wanted to use it anyway, which caused the north to cut off the south from the nanobot shared intelligence network, which has resulted in a stalemate with them both being stuck on the mountains. When you eventually meet the nanobots in the south, you kinda get why it's not a good idea to give them the terraforming device.
Our communications with the outside have been effective. Our chosen hominids have arrived. You are an organic, flesh and bone and blood. Such weakness, such softness. The small Homo sapiens have come to bow before the masters of metal and lightning.
Wait a sec, we've heard that somewhere before.
Who are your old gods?
The old gods are ancient forms of metal and lightning.
So it turns out these nanobots in the south have been sending out theta wave signals, which were manipulating the Chizinyama via their dreams.
Plans for the transport vessel were sent. Organic samples were requested. A labor force was requested.
They did all this to escape the mountains. It's very ironic that the Chizinyama who used others were themselves being used by someone too. And that's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this part of the game, as there's still the moss, which are talking plants that have a painful connection to the nanobots and are the source of the herb the Nasi use. You can also talk to the scientist who created all this, and see what the original plans were for these experiments, and tell her how things have gone way beyond what she designed, as the things she was messing with now have sentience and are all going in different directions than what she intended, which all makes for a really compelling choice in what to do with all these different factions, as some just want to live and do their thing, while others want to spread out and maybe take over the world. And the one who created it all just wants to get rid of all the sentient beings she created. It really shows off a world where advanced technology was used with almost no ethics or regulation, and has resulted in a world that has some amazing things, but without restraints. It was almost inevitable that something was going to cause an apocalypse of some kind. With the way this world was run, it was basically racing towards it. There's even more stuff in the story, but if I get into it, this will turn into a multi-hour long video. Like, there's still the boss, who I'm pretty sure what was left of the apartheid government. They created most of the tech that's now in the world. And you can tell they were not the best people when you interact with some of their tech later in the game, called a virtual knowledge slave who can scan stuff for you.
Thank you kindly for placing this detritus in proximity to the scanning circuitry. Kush does not consider you a vulture. You would be something the vulture would eat.
This virtual knowledge slave was based on genetically engineered scribes created by the boss way back when, who might have been where the origins of the Ascendancy started, who now control most of the military agnates and access to the Penrose. But that origin is me taking a big guess and connecting the dots, so I could be completely wrong. There was no wiki or sources or interviews I could find to back up that theory. But whatever their origins, the Ascendancy eventually destroyed most of the boss, and what was left of them ran away and later became the Mongrels, who are a tribe of big game hunters with a strong Mad Max vibe going. And later on, a young mongrel found a bristleworm and kept it as a pet. Then it escaped, got into their head, took them over, and eventually became the first Flay, who have been kidnapping mongrel kids ever since to make more Flay, while the mongrels have managed to keep the Flay contained with some old tech. But like, where did the worm come from? Are they aliens or something? No, as you'd probably expect at this point, they are an experiment that's gone wrong.
Well, here is a juicy secret, nah? Those bristle worms of theirs were actually bred to be food. Meat. Apparently they taste like spicy chicken.
And it just goes on and on. There's lots to discover in this game's world. Like, I still haven't even mentioned the robots living off bone marrow and the Mupani who built the water network. This is all the stuff you get to experience going through this game, which is all pretty great to figure out and discover. And it all leads back to the main story, which, if you can remember, is just trying to get Mark, Don and Pooch back by getting parts for that array thing and getting back to the Penrose, to somehow get back to their own time. Which, when you get all the parts for the array from all those quests you did, the game throws another curveball at you near the end, because you need to get on this island called Babel, which is controlled by the Ascendancy, to get back on the Penrose. Though it's heavily guarded, though through story shenanigans you get access to balloon-mounted iron cannons to destroy its defenses. While going through Babel to get to the Penrose, you'll enter a temple with statues. These statues are 3 gods you might have heard about throughout your journey, but these gods do look familiar. And as you see more statues, you find they are showing the choices you made throughout your quests. But these aren't new statues.
These statues are ancient.
So how was it these statues were created knowing what you do before you did them? Well, when you finally get back to the Penrose, you get to talk to the probe at the center of it, whose name is Doris.
Welcome, my friend. Our time apart has been challenging. Thank you for returning to the temple, to the gardens planted and nurtured in your name.
What's going on?
My curious child, your questions are always the same. A mind trapped in linear time cannot fathom this predicament.
Please try to explain it to me.
My child, you are not Mark Leslie. You are a facsimile created from the minds of Mark, Don, and even Pooch an age ago. The helix of infinity binds us all together, a trinity. You three were needed to fulfill the prophecies of this world. But no, we are at the end of our journey, waiting to be pulled through time itself. We shall then start this journey through life again until we meet at this very temple, again and again and again.
Okay, so that's a lot. There's maybe a time loop situation going on where the Penrose aka Doris is trying to break out of the loop by using facsimiles of Mark, Don and Pooch it created from parts of its consciousness. There was a hint of this happening at the start if you looked at the name on that card you got. So basically you were created to go into the world to do something about the arrays, which seem to be holding Doris here in the loop, but by doing that you might be causing the loop. Like, Doris is aware that this keeps happening and is even helping to set up events. Remember old Dolly at the start of the game? They were sent by Doris to shoot down the transport, to give Mark and the others some help. I'm not sure how that explains the statues in the temples, but maybe the loop has happened so much that somehow some of the people living through it have become aware of it and see it as prophecies. There are hints about it in the story, like when you talk to Caesar at the kettle, who I'm pretty sure knew Mark is Dullahan, one of the gods in the statues. Though that's my limited understanding of what's going on, which I am very open to correction about. But it is fun to see all the connections the story has scattered throughout the game come together and try to make sense of them, even though there's probably stuff I'm missing or not getting, though at least after all that, Doris will tell you what happened to the real Mark, Don and Pooch, which will be determined by how you treated them during the story, and they can at least sort of have happy endings. You can try and play through the game again to put more of the pieces together, and there are some small changes you might notice while going through it again.
Trying again, are you? Let's see if you can alter my puppet's destiny.
So Beautiful Desolation is quite a trip if you're curious about exploring what a pretty out there post-apocalypse story can be. It's a world I found great to explore while finding out about its history that has some very interesting interconnected stories and cultural influences from Africa, while showing what a world with low ethics and advanced tech could lead to, that go in directions you might not expect, and has layers to its story that melted my brain a little, though I still enjoyed at least trying to figure it out. I would highly recommend trying the game. It does have a few flaws, but overall it's a great game to experience if you want a bit of a different take on an apocalypse story that could get you thinking a lot. I hope you enjoyed the video. The next 2 or so reviews are going to be viewer suggested ones that I got from a community post a few months back, so stay tuned for those. And if you want to support the channel, you can throw a super thanks my way, though just watching and liking and sharing the videos is great, so no stress. Anyway, thanks for watching, see you next time.
This place is Kiff.